military chart room of the German General Staff has become the Hitler Death Watch. Patton, Bradley, and Zukov are doing more than revealing the weakness of the German army. They are uncovering the evidence of the greatest crime in history. Louder than the roar of Europe's cannon tonight is the mute testimony of 20 million skeletons who would still be men except for Adolf Hitler. And so I remain your New York correspondent, Walter Winchell, who believes that any American, and that anyone who feels we should think twice before punishing the Germans, should think once of the millions of women and children the Germans have starved and mutilated.
The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center here in Skokie is a remarkable new structure. It's dedicated to preserving the memories of the many lives that were lost in the Holocaust. This museum is also being used to educate current and future generations about the need to combat hatred, prejudice, and indifference. I'm Paul Lisnek, and in the next half hour, you're going to hear the moving stories of two Holocaust survivors, and we'll give you a close look inside this very special site of remembrance. Nothing brings the horror, the terror, the pain of the Holocaust to life more so than the stories of those who lived through this worst of human atrocities. 12 million people did not survive the Nazi death camps, never making it over bridges like this to take them on ships to America. And those who did went decades without being able to speak a word of what they had lived through. And so now we meet Fritzi Fritzl and Sam Harris. She survived the death camp at Auschwitz. He made it out alive from Czestochowa. Now, seeing is believing, but hearing their incredible accounts from those who actually lived through this hell on earth, nothing is more powerful. Here are the stories of Fritzi and Sam. It's been many, many years, and for many years, people wouldn't tell their stories. Sam, I'll begin with you, author of the book, Sammy, Child Survivor of the Holocaust. Did you go through a long period of time where you couldn't tell your story or wouldn't?
Paul, I didn't want to. I came here when I was 12 years old after going through the whole Holocaust, and I was adopted in Northbrook. Couldn't speak English. You know, I just wanted to be one of the kids. I want to play baseball. I want to do. So even my adoptive parents I didn't talk to. Yeah, I cried at night when I was sleeping. My mother sat at my bed. We cried together, but I never talked about it through grade school, through high school, through college, and through the business world.
Did people even know that you were a survivor?
And not really, because I just had my 50th reunion from New Jersey. And there was, my picture was in the Tribune. We were collecting artifacts, and they said, "Wow, Sam, I feel terrible. I know you so well, you know." So they didn't know. And then they all started going out for lunch with me. They wanted to know more about it.
And we want to know the story. And I know we
Sure.
can read the book, Sammy's Child Survivor of the Holocaust. But Sam, you were born in 1935.
Yes.
And tell us your story.
I was 4 years old when we were sitting and having lunch. We heard noises outside. We went outside, and there were airplanes shooting at each other. As a little kid, that sounded good. Then pretty soon I saw the airplanes going down in flames. You see, my town of Dęblin, Poland, which is near Warsaw, it had an Air Force. That's where the Polish Air Force got its training, so they came there first. And then pretty soon the Nazis came down, and I remember running on fields, and the Nazis started shooting at the people, and I was introduced to pain and death right then and there. Next thing I know, the Nazis come into our house, they drag my father out, they break sticks, so they start beating him. My brother's hiding in the woods, he sees it all happening, carries him home, and I remember my father laying there.
In my house, in my bed, walked into school. She was allowed to go into class. A man teacher held his hand up to me and told me, Jews are not allowed to walk into class any longer. All the Jewish children in our community were sent home that morning. My mother waited for us, my two brothers and myself, and had to tell us the facts of life. We're now occupied by the German government. We now have to obey all of Hitler's rules and have to follow different orders. And this is how it really started for us.
When you were brought to the camps, we talked about this earlier, I asked you whether you had a number because I've seen survivors, they show me their number. You didn't have a number on you. You learned why you didn't have a number.
The lady that's in charge of Auschwitz concentration camp, her name is Teresa. She explained this to me when I visited the camp. She said she knew exactly what barrack I was in. She knew exactly what transport I came on. And she said when our transport came, the camp was so full that everyone was to go into the gas chambers, directly into the gas chambers. And so somehow or other, I was one of the lucky ones and fell through the cracks.
So no number because there was no need to catalog you because you were set to die immediately.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I know in talking to a survivor who's a friend of mine, she said, Paul, no matter how bad you think it was, picture the worst of the worst in your mind. It was 4,000 times worse than that.
There's just no way to describe it. There's just no way. How do you describe hunger to someone that's sitting with a full stomach? People think it's dieting or skipping breakfast or skipping lunch. And how do you explain hunger where the pit of your stomach is so sore that you would sell your soul for a potato? How do you explain living with death day in and day out? How do you explain living with Dr. Mengele where you had to walk through, get undressed, and walk in this line, and there's this selection. One row goes this way, one row goes this way. One row goes directly to the gas chambers, one row goes back into the barracks. You don't know which row you're in. You don't know if you're in the good row or the bad row. How do you explain waking up in the morning, the person on one side or the other side of you is dead? You have to pick them up with someone's help and bring them and put them in front of the barracks to be counted. It's called appel. How do you explain watching all your friends dying in front of you? How do you explain the lookout posts, the dogs? I can tell you what a dog can do. I avoided dogs for years and years. There's no way to explain Auschwitz. If I sat here from today till tomorrow, I couldn't explain it.
The story of the Holocaust is memorialized and kept alive through books, through movies, and through the stories of its survivors. But time passes, and soon there will be no survivors left to tell, to confirm. The best way to ensure that the darkest chapter of human history is never forgotten is to memorialize it through this living museum. It's an ongoing memorial to those whose memory we wish to preserve and honor. J.B. Pritzker was a driving force to ensure that the funds were raised to build this museum in the heart of Skokie, where so many Holocaust survivors settled after the war. The development, the care, and the telling of that story is in the capable hands of the museum's executive director, Richard Hirschhout. How does steel and stone and glass which surround us relate the horrors, the cries of the 6 million, really 12 million people who died in the Holocaust? How do you get that across?
Well, this is a very strong building, very architecturally striking, and very industrial in its design. You enter from the darkened wing, the darker of the two buildings, and you come into an area of exposed steel, exposed concrete block, exposed ductwork, all to suggest the industrialization of mass murder and to lead you through a darkened path with no natural light, ultimately bringing you into a lighter side of the institution, the white building, which begins to introduce light, which suggests the triumph over this evil and the illumination that hopefully comes from having had this encounter with this terrible history.
JB, this was a $45 billion project, 65,000 square feet, truly overloaded with metaphors. You were the campaign chair, and one of the things you said, what got you moved to do this, was you said you were moved by the survivors' utter unwillingness to disbelieve this museum would get built.
Indeed, their commitment and their passion is what got this built. We have tremendous following of supporters for this museum who were caught up in that passion, and many wrote checks to do it. Many have volunteered to be a part of it, and so we've been very, very fortunate.
It seems, as you've met them, it seems that now they understand the importance of telling a story they once couldn't tell.
And you asked about why Skokie for this museum, and it's because Skokie, the very word, the village, but the very word, is about what sparked many Holocaust survivors to tell their stories. That it was the attempted neo-Nazi march that had many saying to themselves and to others, we must teach about what happened because people have forgotten. It is about never again, but we also remind people it has happened again, and it may again happen if we don't keep drilling it, keep telling people, make sure that the young people who come through this museum learn the lessons.